Now that we've created our text in iBooks Author, you can see I've gone through and pasted everything in the way that I want to have it for my book. We can go ahead and start working with images. You can see there are some images here that iBooks Author has already included for us. And because I like these images, I'm just going to leave them the way that they are. However, if I wanted to, I could drop a new image in there just by dragging and dropping an image there. I'm going to go through here and undo that. So there are two ways that I can drop images into iBooks Author. One, the easiest way, is I can find the image on my computer, I can click on it, and I can drag it and drop it right into my book. From there I can go ahead and modify it. The other way that you can do it is if you use iPhoto on your computer, you can use it this way, and you can go through and choose something from a photo album that you maybe have and drag and drop that right in from there. In my case, I'm going to use the drag and drop feature not from the Media tab, and this is typically what you'll want to do when you're not using iBooks Author on your own computer. So I'm just going to leave this off to the right on my computer screen here so I have it, but you'll know as I'm dragging things in, I'm just simply dragging it from a Finder window on the right side. So in my document here, or in my iBook, I probably want to add some things just to kind of spice this text up. It's a little dull, it's a little drab, and so in here we've got a note in the text that Paris, Rome, and Venice were not to be missed. So I think perhaps here I'll look and see if I can find a picture. I have a picture of Paris, a drawing of Paris here. And so I can put that in, and you can see I can drag it around, and iBooks Author is doing its best to adjust it for me. Now, what I can do too is I can go down here and I can resize it a little bit. So that maybe makes it a little bit more interesting for me, and I'm going to just kind of drag it down here. And see, since it says Paris was a most impressive city for the English, I can do that. Now, when I've dropped an image in, you can see that my bar up here on the top changes a little bit. So I can do things like drop a shadow on it, and I can change my stuff from inline to floating to anchored. And that's really important when we think about how this works in landscape versus portrait mode. So inline, floating, and anchored are really important when it comes to doing the portrait mode, or the up and down layout of your iPad, because as we've discussed in the past, iBooks Author really changes how it looks at your book when you view it in portrait mode. And so if you want to make sure that something is included in portrait mode, you need to make sure that it's put in as inline. And when you do that, then you do have to change where it goes a little and drag it around, and it doesn't drag as freely and as easily as it does when it's floating. However, when we put our iPad into portrait mode now, because it's inline, we know that it's going to show up for us. We're always going to see it right in that same spot. And this is useful in the later stages of publishing too, because if you do publish as a PDF, you'll want that to show up. So I've dragged this in here and I've set it like that. And let's go on to a next page here. And let's say we want to add something over here on the right, because this is a blank page and maybe we don't want to have that there. So we could look at just dragging and dropping an image here of an opera house in Paris in. That will give us a sense of some color. Note again, if I change it to inline, I need to drag it around and decide where it goes. And one of the things that I didn't do with my other image is adjust the levels. And so you can see here is our adjust image. So this is where we can do things like adjusting the saturation on something briefly, or pulling the saturation down. So if you want a black and white, you can do something like that. We could do this and brighten it up a little bit. You can always reset your image here, like this. You can change your exposure and other things that might make the image look a little bit better if you've got an image that doesn't look quite right. So now that we've done that, I'm going to show you a little bit about how to use the inspector tool for the images. So I'm going to go up here and choose inspector. And under layout, this is going to give me some options. Okay? And in the case of my image here, this is not really giving me much opportunity to add anything here except an accessibility description. And this is where I might say an opera house in Paris. And what that's going to do is just make sure that if there is a need for accessible content in iBooks, that there's a description of what that image was or is. You'll notice if I change things back to floating or anchored here, I get a couple of other options for my image. One is a title, so I can say so I can choose that. I can choose different layouts here. Bottom, left, right, and top. I can add a caption to the bottom of it. And I can make sure that it does or does not have a background. And I can drag these around here like this and set that all up for us. The next piece of the image editor that we'll look at is how we can use a mask. So I've dragged in this picture of this young man here, and we're talking about how the Grand Tourist was typically a young man, etc. I'm going to create a floating image for now. Now, let's say I don't want this to be a rectangular image, but I actually want it to be something that has a different shape. So I can do a mask here, and you can see this has done a mask that's a square or another rectangle. But if I go up here to format and I go down to image, I can say a mask with a shape, and I can choose any of these sorts of things. So I could make it a diamond, I could make it a polygon, any of that. I'm going to go for an oval right now. And you can see I'm just pulling this out so it's a little larger. If I hold down the shift key, it will let it keep its shape for me. I can move my image around within it. And so I can put the guy's face here. I can use this to bring the image a little bit bigger or smaller, and then I can move it around. So now I have this great round picture, or slightly rounded here. I can edit my mask again and make that a little bit more round, that I can enter in here, move around, as you can see, to a place where we might want to have that set. Again, we can use the inspector here. We can add titles. We can take away the background. We can add captions to it if we want. I think it's kind of nice in your text, though, to be able to drop in something that looks just like this and have it working in a nice, clean way in your image. So that's how a mask works for that. So that's pretty much the basics of adding images, and we're going to move on now and look at some of the other widgets and charts.